At this time, I call this City Commissioner Workshop to order August the 16th at 6:32. At this time, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and following that, we have the roll call.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Here.
Commissioner Ambrose?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Whites?
Here.
All right, thank you, ma'am. It's on you, ma'am. Good evening.
Finance Director. So the last time I was here, we spoke about the general fund, and tonight we will cover the other funds, if you will. So that's going to be your utility funds, fire fund, things like that that don't fall under the general fund. Sorry, Kevin. Oh, I got it. Okay, sorry. So as I mentioned, we will go through fire, water, sewer, solid waste, water and sewer impact fees, the local option gas tax for roads, wild spaces, public places, the CRA, the building fund, and the cemetery trust. So I want to explain the layout of this. You'll see it throughout the presentation, but I just want it to be easy to understand. There's a lot of numbers. The good news is we have pictures in the middle, so I'll have a little break from numbers, and you'll get to hear from a couple other people than me. So if you look at the top line, you'll see beginning balance. All of these funds have their own fund balance independent from the other funds. So the most important thing about this, these are unaudited numbers. These are our best estimate at what the beginning balance is going to be. They will no doubt change. We haven't had the 21 audit completed yet. That will provide some change as well as how 22 goes. So it's the best information we have right now. So the beginning balance you'll see under the 22 budget and the 22 projection, those are the same number because obviously we're starting at the same time, the beginning of 22. And then if you jump down to the bottom, you'll see two more blue lines, and it's to and from fund balance. So what we do is we look at revenues versus expenses, and then we look to the fund balance to make up the difference. So in this case for fire, you'll see sources. That's all your different sources of revenue. It could be, in some of the funds, it could be you borrowed money. It could be debt proceeds coming in. It could be fees. It could be, like in this case, plan review. Those are your sources. It's just like a revenue. And then under uses, that's all your expenses, and that's the money going back out again. So we compare the sources and uses. So in this case, our sources, if you look at the budget for 22, it's 1.5 million coming in, 1.5 million going out. There's just a little bit of difference of $17,000. You'll see that number's positive. That 17's positive. That means our revenues were bigger than our expenses, so that money goes into the fund balance. Does that make sense? Okay. That's like the fundamental basis of all these sheets, so if it's confusing, I want to get that resolved up front. So the other thing to remember is where there is personnel services in here, we will have the 3% raise that we talked about with general fund. That goes across the organization, as well as putting people in the right step. So that's built into this as well. So the fire department, as I mentioned, right now we're looking at a projection to end 22 with a $221,000 surplus. Again, we have 6 weeks to go. Anything can happen, so that's just our best estimate right now. And then in 23, we have again built in those the raises and the steps. So we're going to need to use $292,000 to balance the budget. So in this case, because we've talked about having a very tight budget, I've used fund balance on these other funds where I can to balance the budget instead of trying to go back to the general fund because we just don't have anything left there to go after. So in this case, our proposed budget will bring our fund balance from 71 down to 0 between the beginning of 22 and the end of 23. Again, those numbers will flux just a little bit between now and final because we'll get some more updated information, but for all intents and purposes, they'll be in the same magnitude. So this one's a little busy, I apologize. This is the water fund. So again, we're starting out with an estimated $115,000 in the water fund budget. Something else I want to just mention, if you were to look at financials, you might see that a fund balance is $4 million or $18 million. That includes all the assets of that fund. So there's a difference between the net position or the fund balance and the cash fund balance. They're different items. So these are the cash fund balances. This does not include the value of the assets in the system, because really that's what we care about is the cash, what we can spend for budget. So sometimes it gets confusing because if you look at a financial statement, you're like, well, look, it says you have 18 million. We don't have $18 million. That just includes all the assets. So I get excited when I see those big numbers, and then they're not what we need. So what we built into the 23 budget is the CPI increase. We used July. The last time I talked to you, we had June's number, which was 9.1%. July's is 8.5%, so that came down a little bit. So that will be helpful to the customers. We still also see an increase because we're projecting a small increase in 23 from having AMI on board. It's not for the whole year though, so it's a very conservative value to bring that up a little bit, but that's already built in. Then at the bottom, in this particular one, you'll see there's capital projects. You're familiar with all these projects. We've talked about them already in 22. The assumption here is that what's budgeted will be spent in 22. If those projects don't get completed, those capital funds will roll into 23 until the project is done. It won't increase the budget for those projects, it'll just slide the timeline. So it won't be new money, it'll just be the same 22 bucket carried over to 23 until it's done. And when we do those things, we'll bring you a budget amendment and we'll make sure we get it all in the right place. In the sewer fund, similarly, we have the increase due to CPI, so that's built in the 23 budget. In this case, we have a couple of grants at the bottom, or a grant for the Swanee River Water Management District for the wastewater treatment plant expansion. Again, same thing, if we don't spend the whole $7 million, the project's not done, we'll carry forward the balance to 23 to complete the project. So again, just to highlight, one other item we have in here under sewer, you'll see mower max. And when Thomas gets up here to talk about roads, if you have any questions, he'll be happy to answer them. It's basically for wastewater for large areas, and the equipment that we currently have is falling apart, costing us a lot of money to maintain. So we're going to get rid of that, salvage, sell it, and then buy this new piece of equipment that's efficient and doesn't need maintenance. The solid waste fund, again, this is contracted out, so we do have a CPI increase. It's a different CPI than, you know how there's all different indexes for CPI. So this is a different one. It's a smaller amount, but per the contract, there is an increase. The other thing is over the public works funds, prior years, Thomas's the director's salary has all been underwater. I've broken it out into the areas that he covers and allocated accordingly to how much time is needed of his within each of those areas. So in solid waste, for example, there's a small portion, I think it might be 5%. He has to manage the contract and make sure that, you know, those operations are going, whereas in water, I think it's 40%. So I've spread those out in here too. So sometimes you'll see that the salaries move and it looks a little odd, and that's why, because I've reallocated people to so they're charged where they're doing the work. And then the water and waste and sewer impact fees are in the next two sections. One of the options here, we looked at, you know, well number 3 relocation. You'd heard that that's going to cost about $70,000 more. I think it was a little bit less last time Bruce mentioned it. So we're recommending using the impact fee funds for that. It's an appropriate use. It's not too much money. You can see the balance in the impact fee fund is not very large in the water fund, so it seemed like an appropriate use of funds. In the sewer fund, there's a lot more money. We talked a lot about what projects could be done with this, and the consensus was, let's wait until the wastewater treatment plant is done. So if we have any overages or issues, this is a good place to fall back to. Once the plant's done, then we can look at other projects, but this is kind of, it's really the only reserve that we have to drop back on if there's an issue with the wastewater treatment plant. So that's our recommendation there. Yes.
For the impact fees, we have to, when we collect those, we have to use those within a certain window,
Right.
correct? So when was the last time we dipped into that, and are any of those expiring, since we haven't done anything with impact fees in sewer in so long?
We'll have to bring that back to you because I don't know. So the next section, roads and streets, local option gas tax. We do have a balance of about $655,000. We are anticipating or projecting in '22 about fund, and the projects that we haven't had any projects this year coming out of that. We have used it to support public safety and through the general fund, and we're trying to lower that. You can see that it was budgeted in '22 at $355, and we're down to $312 for the projection for this year, and then going into next year we're ramping down again to $220. So our intent is to stop using that for public safety unless we have to, and it's a legitimate use for it, but we are trying to move away from that so that it's available for roads projects. We have, you'll see for the '23 budget on the far right, under roads projects, we have $450,000 budgeted. Right now that is a placeholder, and we want to be able to do that many projects. There are 7 or 8 projects that I'm going to turn this over to Thomas and he'll walk through with you. Those projects don't total the 450, but this is where we're going to start, and Thomas has a much longer list that he's been working on too. So we'll come back to you with those, but we want to show you where we're starting and how we want to move forward with those. And again, now you get pictures for a minute. Thomas?
Y'all know I hate coming up to the podium. Like she said, we had $450,000 for road projects. At this time, the pricing that you see that I've already given the booklets to, Ms. Glory, at this price at this time is at $300,000. So I'm trying to hold a little bit buffer zone just in case between now and October or November when the projects get started, the price may be higher through the contractors. So I just want to leave a little buffer zone. If whatever we have left over, we can keep on moving forward on other roads with y'all's permission. But as you see in your pamphlet I gave you, you have 8 individual roads that my staff and myself has went and looked at, and we have them all marked out. And I know each of you know of all these roads, how bad they are with potholes, all the complaints and everything else. So I was just wanting to do a baby step this year and get started, and then let our citizens, taxpayers see what we're doing. And then next year we're going to really hit the main roads. But don't forget now, I'm still going to do the grant, the scope grant. And that's not turning until February, but I already have the paperwork already done. And the 2 roads I was looking at is 244 by the church, completed all the way to 27, and 222 all the way to 174, and hopefully 174 too. Just matters what we get from DOT. And the rankings I kind of went over with y'all how I ranked them. 1 is the worst, 5 is a new road. And then as we go along, as you see in the middle of them slots, we'll keep on writing down to keep a track of it, because roughly every 10 years you should be coming back to that road to redo it. Any questions? Well, I'm glad I did this early.
Well,
because I hate podiums.
Mayor? All right. Yeah, one, this is a huge step.
Yes.
To have a list of roads and rankings, and a lot of work went into this, and it's a tangible document that we and citizens can begin to work with, so thank you. And everybody that was involved in that. I think that your priority, even though they're just small spots, would make a difference. So, okay, for that. I just saw this tonight, so I looked really quickly. Did you have Boxcar Court at all on the, it didn't, since that's a name, I didn't see it. Is that in here somewhere?
It's in there, but I can't exactly remember where I got it.
Okay.
But-
And even if it weren't a part of this first group, if there was some extra money, and the reason that normally I'd say, hey, your road's falling apart, I understand it, we got a lot of priorities, but since the city of High Springs is the one that told the contractor, leave it the way it is and don't put asphalt down, that I think we need to assume some responsibility for the fact that their road, really has failed at this point. So, anyway, but we'll look at that, and thank you for getting this together
Well,
this
see,
way.
that's why I'm hoping with that extra funds that hopefully will be there, 150,000, we can move forward on some of them other ones. And that's what the book's for y'all to write notes, each of you, and keep up, and then the following year say, hey, Thomas, we need to look at this road, and add it in for next year. So that's what your booklet's for you to write notes and everything else.
I had a mower question. For the sewer, I saw a budget item in there for that mower. That's Bahia grass that's growing under the spray field that you're talking about mowing?
What it, did I leave it back there? What the mower is, y'all probably seen them up and down some of the highways. And whenever we go to the wetlands with the ditches, we can mow it. Besides, I can mow the side of the roads. Instead of us having to rent a piece of equipment, I think it was a little over 10 grand we rented for a month.
Okay, so that's not just for mowing the spray fields?
That's just not mowing the spray fields. We're gonna be able to mow roads,
Okay.
side of roads. I'm getting attachments. It'll have a broom on it,
Okay.
everything.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just curious, because I know some places, a farmer comes in and mows it for the city because they use it as feed, but you're talking about something that's used more than the spray field.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
thanks.
once they start doing the wetlands, when they do the project, we're not gonna be able to get in there and mow without this. And I know in Columbia County, they have 2 of them, and they love them. Gainesville's got 2 of them, and I've talked to them, and they love them. So we got a price on them, leasing.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to thank you, really. This is data-driven, it's pragmatic, it shows something that we're doing, and this is what people have been begging for, so I really appreciate this. Aside from the first page, I appreciate the book very much.
Okay, thank you. Anytime you got a question on a road or something, please call me. If as long as it's the city manager and Bruce is all right with it, call me and we get to discuss them or look at them.
We're able to actually look at, citizens can actually look at is huge, is tremendous. Thank you.
Okay. The next section is wild spaces, public places, and I'll review the numbers, and Damon will come up and talk about the projects on the following slides. We actually got more money than we anticipated this year from wild spaces, public places. You can see the budget on the left, the first line of data, wild spaces half-cent sales tax. We projected 384 and we got 476, or we're projecting 476 based on what it's been so far this year. So that's a good surprise. The land conservation grant, Damon had come to you before or gone to the state and got permission to roll that forward, so that's being rolled forward to 23. The 2022 debt proceeds, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, any sources of money coming in that you're going to use for operations or purchases, that 589 came in, it comes in under the sources section, And when you get to the bottom under uses, if you go down to the capital outlay line, you'll see it's going back out again as part of that 600,000 to make the purchase of the canoe outpost. And then the very last line, you'll see the 2022 note. That is the debt service payment for that loan starting in 2023. So at the bottom, you'll see the 96,953. That'll be our first debt payment during fiscal year 23. And then Damon will go through the projects that are currently underway. Keep in mind, most of these projects are very early planning or they're in a design phase and we don't have bids yet for them. So let me go back one. So you'll see the capital outlay for 23 is $1.2 million. That's a placeholder for all these projects that he's going to go through. Once we get the planning done and bids are coming in, we'll get better numbers and we can bring those to you as we get them. All right, I'll turn over to Damon to walk through the projects.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, Commission, just to give you a little idea of where we're at currently with the projects that we have listed here. Memorial Park, we're creating an RFP currently right now. We've gotten some of the work done. We bush hogged the property. We've also taken care of the basketball courts and the tennis courts, which was part of the grant. We also crowned the ball field that's closest to 441. So far that's where we're at. There's quite a bit we have to do and able to build a new ball field with irrigation and lighting. We're going to go with Musco lighting, which is going to take a big chunk. So we're estimating roughly about $700,000 for the ball field, but $200,000 will get reimbursed through the Land Water Conservation Grant. There's like a site plan that we have currently right now. We're trying to save as many trees as possible. We also have a listing of a site plan with the trees. I don't have it here. However, it does show the trees that we are saving quite a bit, at least the older ones we're trying to do. That's why where the field, as you can see, where it's located, initially the plans were first where the actual field was turned the other way, but we decided to turn it this way so we could save as many trees as possible on the property. And there you go, there's the basketball court. We just got that resurfaced several months ago, tennis court. And now we're on to the Catherine Taylor Park. We're working on an RFP as well for that. We've gotten all the asbestos and the mold out of the actual building. We're looking roughly to spend anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 to convert the daycare into a community center, voting district, more of a multi-purpose center rather than just a daycare. We've had several forums in the past. The majority of the people in the community wanted to have an actual community center on that side of town, so we feel that would be our best bet. Here's another picture of currently where it's at right now. We're also working in conjunction with the Douglas Society, Historic Society. We're trying to find the actual color of the old school from how it was several years ago. So that's where we're at with that. There's another picture there. And this is the windows at the old school. And as you can see right there, that's a pretty big issue right there. So you could tell that that's pretty urgent. So we're jumping on that. I've been communicating with Thomas with Public Works, and he's trying to help out with that as well to find someone who can actually come in there and replace these windows on our historic building. And it's just another picture of the canoe outpost, right? Well, picture of the canoe outpost. And as you can see here for the canoe outpost, we're going to extend, if you see the yellow line, that's an additional 2 feet. We're going to extend the pathway, so it'll be 6 feet total. And we got that approval from the Swanee River Management. And we're hoping to get everything complete by November. We're now waiting on Swanee River Management to approve the plans. And we're going to also replace the dock as well. As you can tell, it needs to be taken care of. And that's where we're at. Any questions?
we're moving on to the CRA. Same setup. You can see that we are anticipating close to $121,000 from each, our contribution and the county's contribution to CRA. We currently have about $300,000 in the fund balance, and we're anticipating drawing down from the fund balance about $55,000 in 2022. And in 23, we're trying to move forward with more projects, and we're looking at using about $165,000, which would still leave us with $250,000. And we can always come back, of course, and get permission to do other projects, to use fund balance. That can also take place later.
So I just want to go over a few of the projects that we will be bringing to the CRA board to see if y'all are interested in doing these when we bring the budget to the CRA board. The main ones were under contract services, and these were in the strategic plan, a potential master plan for public property downtown. As you know, there's a lot of city facilities downtown, and we're at capacity within our buildings. So a master planning effort would be well worth the money prior to moving forward on any projects. And so we can get everyone on the same page, how they want things to look in the future. Another potential project for that is if we can get all the cities together, you know, not to give up the effort, Rails to Trails. So get all the cities in one room, come up, you know, again, not on Zoom. I think the Zoom thing's not really working for us anymore. And get everyone personally at the table and figure out what the plan is moving forward, and possibly could we all participate and put some money in a pot and hire one proponent who's going to take ownership of moving forward on the initiative on behalf of the cities and counties that are interested in trying to gauge that way. I think one of the things going on, everyone wants it to happen, but everyone's so busy that it's just kind of nudging along and not the big push it needs. So that was one idea. Then we have the contract services for our High Springs Police Department. That's usually like First Fridays or other events. So that's what that placeholder's for. The other thing, there's the marketing and promotion items has been increased substantially. That's for staff thought that internally we would get a comprehensive marketing plan for the CRA board to hopefully approve that would involve recruitment, retention, and tourism. And that would have, you know, places we were going to market, the city of High Springs downtown, and events and activities associated with those that the downtown is interested in. As well as, and then improvements other buildings is a significant amount of money that has been put in there, approximately $90,000, but we took out some more money that had been put for another project, so that could be $130,000 for lighting downtown. We had talked about replacing the toppers. Thomas had been working on that, and Bruce, and we've been working on a parking plan downtown that Kimberly Horn has been doing for us, and that should be coming before you shortly. So there's money in there. Should we want to go after grants, partner on that? Like, what's the next step after we get the plan to be able to move forward on that? And then the amount has been increased for the grant program expense, the Facade grants, which we've been talking about expanding, bringing to you. As you know, several structures downtown are not in the best repair. And so allowing people to come forward on structural issues as well, so we don't have issues like some of the buildings that have been code violations this past year, so that we don't want any more buildings that are starting to come down. We don't want to lose our assets downtown. So those were some of the staff recommendations that we'll be bringing to the CRA board for your consideration.
I like the fact that you're looking at spending money, because that fund just keeps growing. You know, we did adopt a comprehensive plan, and we're going to use that as the basis for expanding the CRA. So I guess I'd like to see how some of these things fit into that plan that we've adopted goes for. And, you know, if I had to choose between marketing and I'll call it stabilization grants versus facade grants, I'd
Right.
rather go with a stabilization grant or something like that. And, you know, really, I mean, we actually voted on spending money on some lighting, so I don't see that that's already allocated here. So if staff has decided that what we voted on spending isn't going to happen, or it needs to happen at a different scale, we may need to reconsider that. But we actually approved an expenditure. So lighting's a huge priority.
Right.
Sidewalks are a priority. Making some of the sidewalks a little more handicap friendly, you know, and walkable in the downtown. Live Oak had a really broken up downtown, and they took a huge hunk of their CRA money and repaved and fixed a lot of the little streets that branched off of downtown, and it made a huge difference in investment in properties and things like that. And I'd like to see the CRA funds going to things that not only, you know, look good or feel good, but really improve the value of that space for those owners, and that we help them, you know, identify ways to find some grants and funding to do some real substantial projects on their buildings, if that need be the case. So
I'm in agreement. Just to let you know, several of these we have on page 5 of your strategic plan. There's 6 major initiatives. Number 1 is Rails to Trails, which is mentioned in there. Number 2, redirecting truck traffic, which has been worked on this year. Number 3, infrastructure that improves, as you discussed, walkability, safety, parking. So we had the parking and the lighting for the safety. So definitely relook at the sidewalks as well. It's a very good decision. Then we had, let me see, the master plan for the city hall. So we definitely, I just want you to know, we definitely looked at this. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, may I? We've got a new line item, it looks like here, $40,000 for a vehicle.
That was a mistake. It's been taken out.
Okay. I'll mark through that. And then the Christmas decoration, we're paying $20,000 a year to rent Christmas decorations? How much would it be to buy them?
Just to buy the Christmas tree would be about $25.
We have a Christmas tree planted. You mean buying something fake?
The actual Christmas tree needs to come down. It's diseased. It needs to be taken out. We've been kind of going back and forth on that a little bit internally. But to buy an artificial tree, we had prices anywhere from $25,000 to almost $40,000 on an artificial tree. This also includes the pole decorations downtown as well. So it's not just for the tree. It includes all the pole decorations. We expanded where the pole decorations went last year as well, and we'll do an additional expansion this year to pick up any gaps we had in the Christmas decorations as well.
I do like me some Christmas decorations. That's just a lot of money to make things sparkle.
We don't have any maintenance on it doing it this way, where we have our other older reefs and other older style lights that need to be replaced at this point. One, they're old, they need to be replaced, and the cost of that program would have been way more expensive than leasing these at this point.
Do we install them as well, or
Nope.
does somebody else does that
They
for us?
install them, they handle everything.
And we don't have to store them
Oh,
either.
exactly. All we have to do is tell them where to put them.
And I'm with Commissioner Ambrose on the marketing. I think the best way you market your town is by making it look as good as you can.
Okay.
So I mean, I appreciate the idea for sure, but yeah, some of the sidewalks are bad. So,
Yeah.
And that's why we have
can take
$20,000 for
down-
Christmas decorations, to make it look as good as we can for the
yeah,
holiday season.
you know it.
We'll take down some of the marketing. We want to leave a little bit in there because it's not just, the marketing wasn't only materials and ads and things like that. It was also to, several of the downtown businesses wanted more events. So the promotion part of it was maybe we can do movies in the park or bring back the bands in the park, stuff like that too.
So that all of those kinds of things would fall under the marketing umbrella?
Because it says marketing and promotion, so
Okay.
that you could
Okay.
put that. I mean, we could do
No, I like
events,
those
but that way
ideas.
it kind of gives us
bringing
like,
people
putting
downtown.
it, putting it all in one line item because you use the marketing part to promote the event. So it just,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyone else? And the building fund, this year in particular, we had quite a bit of revenue above budget. We're anticipating going back to more of a standard level of permitting and fees. So we are looking at a projected $525,000 coming in on a $360,000 budget, but going back to $360 next year. We are aware that the balance has a limit on what it can be and how long it can be there. We're having a lot of conversations internally about the best way to manage that responsibly. And then the cemetery fund. So we actually are looking at using the cemetery fund for the maintenance of the cemetery with the personnel and operating expenses. Historically, those have been paid out of the cemetery fund, but it is an allowable use under the cemetery fund. So in order to take a little pressure off of the general fund this year, we put the $58,000 into the cemetery fund. We have talked about other capital projects in the cemetery area, including fencing. The bids that we got for that were $125,000 plus, and the balance has to be at least $100,000. So for this year, we're recommending that we just do the 1 year of the personnel services and operating out of the cemetery fund, and then next year, as we're building the budget, not anticipating using it in this way. And then the reserve fund, again, we're looking at this year only needing to use $50,000 if we're at the $950. We're still doing the audits and confirming that those transfers are all being made and everything's happening so that we have the balance we think we have. But that will get us to the $1 million this year in '23. Okay. So yay, we're gonna party. And that's it. That's the end of my slides. Are there any other questions that you want to address? Silly question, right? Oh, don't apologize. That's why we're here.
Yeah. It looks like we've got in fire control a new paramedic. Is that a new position? Is that an added position?
The paramedic pay has always been being paid, but it was combined in the salary line. So those firefighters that are paramedic certified get a stipend on top of their salary. So we just broke it out so it could be really clear where we're spending the money.
Okay. And on that same page, regular salaries, the proposed 23 versus fiscal year 22 projection is up 32%. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's big.
We've changed some FTEs around, added some FTEs, plus we got to remember they were $7,000 under where they should be getting paid. So we did salary adjustments. Everybody got salary adjustments. Everybody got moved to the right class. So those adjustments are in that budget as well.
What is our total debt service versus our total budget? Do you have those numbers?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can certainly follow up and send it to all of you.
I would appreciate that,
Sure.
if you don't mind. And I had another question about the wastewater treatment plant. The $7 million grant is for the new wastewater treatment plant. Does not speak about the wetlands treatment discharge at all. So that's obviously coming down the pike at some point. Do we have any sense for how much that's going to cost?
That $7 million includes that funding source. It includes both.
$7 million
It's
to
two
build the
separate-
plant and construct
Correct.
the treatment wetlands?
Correct. I know, but we've been dealing with this for over 5 years now. So it's, the projections we're getting back on the cost we're within market. So we won't know until we go out to bid. And that's where I'm waiting on. I believe we got everything back from Swanee River at this point and everything, all the permitting's back, so we should be going out to bid with the scope of work here very shortly.
For both the plant and the wetlands concurrently?
Correct.
So then, would the discharge be phased out from Sprayfield to wetlands, or is it going to be a one fell swoop?
I'd have to look at what Tim's planning. I don't know. I can't speak on that. I believe we're phasing it out. but I would have to confirm that with the engineers. But if they're phasing it out, they're not doing it all at once. It'll be a slow phase out, right?
Have we had any conversations with the folks that live nearby to let them know what the plan is? Because there are some issues that could come up with a wetlands treatment, mosquitoes, critters, other stuff that may impact the area around.
It shouldn't be up next to any residential where it's actually going. It should
Okay.
be far enough on the backside and butting up to the field where Long Cala just replanted all those pine trees. So it's not shouldn't be close enough to the road. It's
Okay.
actually on the backside of where the spray field is in that corner.
Do we have any plan sets for that I could look at?
I don't think we've gotten them yet, have we? You got a set? I know I haven't seen them yet.
I'll bring you some muffins if you let me see it. Okay. I think that's all I got.
Along with Catherine's question, Commissioner White's question about the debt service, the original sewer bonds, when, were those 30 years?
Yes,
Okay, so we've still got, what, about another 8 years on those?
yeah, at least. Well, they're 2003 and 2009, so.
Okay. Okay. And then a codes enforcement is going to be under which budget?
Planning.
Planning budget, so we
Right.
haven't gotten there
So we
yet.
moved that FTE out of the police department and into the planning department.
Okay.
That will report to the city manager.
The plan is with the magistrate to start becoming more proactive and to finally get the IPMC passed and also have some neighborhood programs tied along with it, like community identity, cleanup programming. The police has done some of it, but, maybe try to take it to another level within what budgetary, amounts we have.
Okay, but that'll be a full-time position, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Code focused only. Okay.
Mayor, the codes enforcement will be a full-time position. Okay.
That is it. Thank you. Prior to September 8th, I will follow up with you and get you a budget book, so we have all this finalized and compiled. And like I said, there may be some minor tweaks now that we've gone through everything. We've had a little more time pass as far as actuals hitting, but there will be nothing significant, and I'll point out to you what's changed. But we'll have that to you prior to September 8th so that you're comfortable with what you're voting on that day.
Okay, and then, no matter what, we've got another year with wild spaces. So we're good budgeting this year and counting on it. And then if the millage passes as it's on the ballot, then the current wild spaces would stop in January and we'd be into the new wild spaces, but it should be about the same amount of money. So that doesn't change. But then we would start receiving infrastructure money, correct?
Right.
That we would then literally be able to add to the budget potentially if that passed, correct?
Right.
Yeah, it
Okay,
can-
but none of that's budgeted, obviously,
No.
so, okay.
And we are working on a capital plan. Thomas has already started on it, so that we have more of a comprehensive capital projects list that all the departments will be involved in, and we can really do a 5-10 year look at that, so we can start saving for projects or planning how we're gonna budget them, look at, replacement funds, so when we know we have to replace something every 3 years, we've already got the money planned in there. We don't have a really good source for that right now, so that's gonna take some time to get up and running, but we are working on that, so I don't want you to think that we've forgotten about it, but we are looking at long-term planning at this point.
And as part of that, there'll be a asset management plan as well. So that's a separate but compatible component. So, and Jonathan has a lot of experience in that. So that was one of the reasons he was hired too.
And manager, we had conversations about selling the CRA building to have a return on investment to the CRA for that purchase and generating some usable capital for the CRA. using their surplus and knowing they'd outgrow that building. So eventually they potentially would be selling that and building something with whatever. Are we putting that plan aside at the moment, or is that still in the thought of staff?
I think a couple things. I think one thing, we brought it to y'all, if y'all remember, the CRA board, and there wasn't an agreement on price. So that kind of like, do y'all remember that, where there was the amount to sell or something? It went a little dead after that because of the amount that people thought we should sell it for or not. But the thought process is not just to say, no, we're not looking at that anymore. I think what we want to do is bring y'all options, because obviously building's already in there. There's been some thought about putting building and public works together in a building. There's been conversations about other people who might want to occupy that building, as well as buildings of selling it. As well as thoughts of selling it. So we kind of wanted to bring to y'all here like a bunch of options and let y'all brainstorm and have a discussion. And then if it's still you're interested in selling the building, we'll pursue that. And we would probably need to get another appraisal because prices have changed so drastically, which would likely push it up more to like what I think when we originally brought it and we estimated price at, based on the appraisal and some other factors. The thought process that it should go for higher, but the appraisal didn't pan out. But I think now the appraisal might pan out, if that makes sense. So that it's a whole, you can bring that discussion back up again. So, anyway, so we will bring that back before the board again with all the options and let y'all guide us on what y'all want us to do.
May I? So the budget is based on the current millage rate,
Yes.
no increases.
Correct.
5.99 is where it's right now. And the book that you say you're putting together, that's got detailed line items for everything by department, or how is it?
So the information that I sent you before each of these meetings, that will be compiled into one book with summary information as applicable on projects and things like that. So this year will be the first year doing it, so we'll start out slow, but we'll build on it as we go and put more information in it. It becomes a really good resource document for staff too. I've always really, I walk around my budget book, so it really does help.
I appreciate it. This is wonderful. It's easy to follow. I like the format.
Good. No, thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else need to come before this board? And then we entertain a motion to adjourn.